Welcome to those in the room and out there in online land. This is the first of what I hope, but you all will determine this, would be maybe the first of a number of briefings this year to both the press and the public from the standpoint of the mayor and council. The whole purpose here is to just be able to find other ways to communicate interactively, but we have an obligation to tell you not only what we plan to do, but what we are doing and what we have done. And sometimes not all three of those segments happen. So I thought by doing this, giving you a chance to have dialogue with the mayor, that might help. And it's also a format that doesn't work by law in the council chambers, where we can hear public comment and can't say a thing back. And similarly, in our council committee meetings, it's basically the same way, and controlled by the Brown Act as well. Easier in one-on-ones, but then you can't get to the audience, so a broader audience. So that's the intent. We're going to more or less plan these for about monthly, but it's going to depend on news cycles, news breaking, as well as other things like a state of the city might take the place of one of these, because that's also somewhat interactive. If I happen to note a personal opinion, that's exactly what it is. I don't represent all opinions of all 7 of my colleagues, or 6 of my colleagues. I generally won't, because I just want to kind of communicate to you with stuff and make reactions. In terms of when I'm done with a number of my items, I'm going to go to the press first for their kind of comments, which I think would also help you all in the audience with their questions and my answers. And then we'll come back to the public. And when I come to the public, which it can be interactive, but this is intended to be a question session, not a speech session. So if you have a particular position on something, I would like it to be connected to a question, not just information back sort of one way to me. So, and then this is set up to be a 1-hour cutoff, which can be shorter if need be, but I want us to kind of stay on point. It is broadcasting live, but there's not going to be any interaction with those folks. Okay, so I just want to go first of all into any questions on the ground rules? I should have said that. No, okay. I want to go into a couple things of recent council action, and that may be where it makes sense to start. But we're testing on all of this, so we'll get feedback afterwards of what should be. But so I want to go over recent council action, starting with a couple of key priorities that were addressed last Monday on our budget. It was the mid-year budget review, and as is typical, we take little action in the mid-year review intentionally, because we want more data, more analysis in the full-year budget review, which starts very soon and ends in June. So the first thing I'll talk about is that we did approve near-term staffing on a first step basis for to support a fire engine in Fire Station 4. A second thing we did was actually authorize purchase of a new engine, which was already in process in the Public Works Department for the longer term. So that's going to go ahead in advance of, because of their lead times, in advance of working a longer term solution for full staffing and equipment at that station. The other thing we did is we approved a bit more money for downtown cleanliness, which is something that is on all of our minds when we go down there. It's looking better, but we needed just a little bit more in the mid-year to do that. We added 1 revenue producing person to the Junior Museum and Zoo, and I say it's revenue producing because this person is going to be in charge of booking group parties, and the calculation is that the revenue from that, birthdays, events, weddings, whatever, will offset the full cost. So it's a full cost recovery position over time as it gets going, net neutral at the worst case scenario, and probably contributing to the overall plus. As we said the other night, noting that our budget forecasting is cautious but concerning. We do have shortfall in tax revenues, sales tax revenues, driven primarily by lower car sales. So you or I can predict where car sales are going and then be experts on what we should do with the budget, but we can't right now. So we're being cautious about that and presuming that that's going to continue and taking that in our budget process, which I do think is going to be somewhat sober this year because we've been using excess reserves, but now we're down to reserves, to use layman's terms, and we're projected to have somewhere between 7 million shortage and then a little bit more over the next 2 years. That's because of where we have budget now. We don't have crystal balls. It's about our estimates right now. It doesn't mean it's going to happen, but we're trying to be cautious, and so we're managing in that direction. When it gets to the budget, I just hope that residents are listening, that if we're going to add, for example, a $4 million fire truck, that doesn't come from my back pocket or a miracle. Something else might have to be traded off as we do our planning for fiscal 26. So that's some comments there. Without getting into a whole lot of detail, I just wanted to do another review of the colleagues memo that we dealt with last week on the federal administration, the executive orders, and the possible impact on Palo Alto. So I just want to kind of share the initial intent again, and upcoming council action and when it's going to come back for approval. The overall goal was to restate our published values as a city and to tell the citizens that we are still leading from those values. In doing so, that doesn't mean we're going to break the law. We're never going to break the law. It doesn't mean that we're going to be out in front of City Hall doing civil disobedience. I wanted to really underscore that because some people were thinking that this was just the beginning of council member-led demonstrations. That is not the point. The point is to say that some of these things that are coming down from the EOs are really a threat to financing of things. We've started to see that already, to financing of things that are either personal or city-oriented. And so we put together, that's our value system. It's published and it's documented. We want to move from that to, in those memos, a few examples of what could be coming down the pike or already has and the risks. And then looking at what actions we could take, which end up being obviously letting all you know all the time when there's any risks coming down the pipe and talking with our own representatives, federal representatives, working with other counties when necessary, and potentially taking legal action of either joining lawsuits as an amicus brief or doing it on our own. And then from there, we needed a process to do the latter. So what happened is that some of you have heard about the wonderful but not always productive Brown Act. That's a state law where only 3 council members can talk on one issue at one time. In this case, 2 council members, myself and the vice mayor, made the initial proposal. Some other people wanted to comment on that, but the only way to do it was to do another colleagues memo. And so then 3 did that. So now we have 5 on the table, and 2 hadn't seen the second one, and 4 hadn't seen the second one. And then happily we got to sit in council and talk about what we wanted to do. But what it turned out is when the second memo was submitted, it was substantially similar to the first memo, which means that we are on the same page in terms of all of what I just recapped. And the plan right now is just to go back and do a very brief review of 2 to 3 council members of basically merging the 2 together, which I think is quite minor. However, more laws and regulations. There's lead times to get those into the packet, has to be reviewed by legal, so it's not going to come back Monday, which would have been great. But I think we can, with that sort of precision and time frame, get back on this quickly and get it done. Couple of comments. I know we have representatives from the newspapers here, and they don't write their own headlines, so I want to state that to begin with. But one report said that the residents were on both sides. Well, that's true, which is pretty much the case of every issue that we have in Palo Alto. But the incoming email to council was unbelievably high in support of this. It was approximately 95% saying that we want this. That was based on the first resolution, and then there were some, as I said the other night, really thoughtful, constructive comments from our residents that we all listened to and looked at. Maybe some of the examples that were there in the first section were just a little bit, heavy on the wording, and so that was toned down, and that was sort of the only thing that was really changed as we go forward here. So we think we're going to get there very quickly. We think we're going to be in good shape and aligned on that. Okay, so that's a couple of the recent actions, and then I want to go on to a couple of things here going forward, and I want to start with
how. Just a clarification.
Sure.
On the two sides, two drafts are quite similar. But when I look at the original draft, that was quite different from the second draft.
Correct.
So now you're saying that you took out a lot of parts from the original draft. So the revised first draft is akin to very similar to the second draft. The first draft was, was very...
Excellent clarification. Excellent clarification. Yeah, because that's why I said that what was taken out of the first draft of the first memo was some of the language that was described in what I call the examples of some of the threats from the administration. And sort of the wording was changed there to sort of tone down the wording and not be sort of so specific.
Neither draft has any reference to Trump now.
One does.
First one.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I said I probably wouldn't express any opinions, and here I go. From my point of view, I think people know who we're talking about. It's the current administration, and we know who's the president. So I'm not sure that the wording in that regard, really drives the substance of the memo. But it was a good clarification. Okay, I want to go to something that, as we know, is very, very important, and that's housing. The new, we shifted the definition in our priority session this year to implementation of housing for social and economic benefits. And I get stopped by people in the street saying, how come we're not building any housing? And I think the concern is that, we don't see digs on El Camino, and so we're not doing it. But it takes a long time, and that long time is substantially driven by the applicant, because once they have we've got the zoning in place. We've got a lot of zoning, we've got a lot of changes. The good news is the developers are liking it. I met with, in a 24-hour period this week, I met with 3 developers who have projects that are, they're excited about. And so it is really, the changes that we made are really attracting attention and attracting development. But between the time that they get interested in using their land for that, and do all their drawings and figure it out and work and interface with the planning department, and then go through the application process and get a permit and then bring out their bulldozer, it takes some time. So I don't think it's visible. So what I want to do in these meetings, particularly on this issue, is monthly or so, just update you on what are we building now. And so here's just a headline for next month where I want to go into this even more detail on what we're building. So right now, the city has 2,232 units in our pipeline. That's a lot. That's a lot. And 403 of those are affordable units in all the categories of very low income, and moderate income. And when I talk about affordable housing units, that means deed restricted affordable housing units, not just cheaper places or anything like that. So I just think we ought to look at that and realize that we're making some progress. So that's the goal here. And then we have, let's see, another 200 units right now are being reviewed for building permits, and another 208 are currently under construction, not including the 88 shelter rooms that are Palo Alto Home Key. So just wanted to give you a flavor of that. I truly believe that what we have put into the housing element and is working, and it's also working with the developers. So that's just, I think, an important point to tell people from the press perspective and also your own circles. The next thing I just want to mention, about, but Valley Water is planning to shift $23 million in funding from North Bay, Santa Clara County sea level project to San Jose with no notice to us. So with Ed Chicada and Ed Lauing, we wrote a letter to that group and said, no, that doesn't make sense. You need to put this on hold so we can have a chance to discuss this, which they did. And then we didn't know for how long, but appealed to them again. And basically, we're saying that we need some time in the area of a couple of months to have this thing deferred, and that gives us a chance to have a chat with you and with Mountain View. And they are supportive of this direction, unless you've heard differently since I wrote this. And so I've appointed an ad hoc committee of Councilmembers Burt, Reckdahl, and Stone, all who have experience with water issues, to work on this with Valley Water and see if we can come to some resolution. So I want to just update you on that item. Next, just want to point out that the bicycle and pedestrian transportation plan is continuing now with a lot of public engagement. And there's an online interactive map and comment tool still open online through April 30th. And community workshops are happening to get ongoing input from all of the stakeholders, and that will certainly help draft our plan. We're expecting council consideration of this at the end of 2025. Update on the rental registry, first time we've ever done this, which is to actually get information in detail on the rentals that are happening here, which is going to be a baseline for us to make a lot of decisions. So it's really important. It was a little controversial getting going. I think the businesses and the landlords are understanding why we need it, and we've tried to keep it very low cost, and us assuming more of the cost of actually processing this. Right now, there's about 4% of the properties that were required to participate in this that still haven't registered. So that's a negative way of saying 96% of those have registered.
So, commercial? Yeah, for retail?
Landlords.
Residential.
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 Yeah. So, and we're trucking down that 4% so that we don't have to get into the penalty zone, which is like $50 a unit. So, very pleased to see that cooperation between the city and the landlords. Just want to mention one other thing. As you know, we have the Palo Alto link, and there's been some discussion and visibility on that. I'd say generally it's been positive. Some people have complained a little bit that the contractor there is getting a little bit pushy on trying to sell them new rides and so on, but the intent was to have lower price lifts, if you want to put it that way. And so we still have that. It's very costly for us, and we had a grant, and this is something we're going to have to be looking at very closely in this next budget cycle. I just want to point out that we're not the only agency within our city that's doing this. So for folks that are wondering, how can I supplement that if they're busy, or what else can I use? I'll just give you one example. The city's a major partner with Avenidas, the senior organization. They have one called Avenidas Door to Door, which is a service that last year they did 3,000 rides and also some deliveries. The rides are for health-related appointments or social engagements or grocery shopping. $5 for 5 miles or $10 for 10 miles within a 10-mile radius from downtown, Monday to Friday, 8 to 4, which is approximately the hours that we do, and approximately we're a little bit broader in our coverage. Yeah. So I just want to point out that if people are looking for alternatives and they're worried that Link is shrinking, just check around. Here's one, particularly for seniors, but there are some other services available. Let's see, and I just want to say that yesterday staff hosted the second University Avenue Downtown Stakeholder Group meeting, which also included Ramona Street businesses discussing design options for car-free streets on Ramona. So there's going to be more of a, quote, permanent design there. Okay, we all like compliments, so occasionally we get one, and I wanted to read it to you tonight. It says, from a resident, I parked in the Bryant Street garage the other day, and the new lighting system directing motorists to empty spaces is wonderful. It makes it so easy to see exactly where the space is, or where the space is empty. I know our community has waited a long time for this, but now that it's done, I think it's a real success. Thank you. And it happens to be from someone sitting in the first row here, Diana Diamond, who's a columnist. So we appreciate that, and the city staff appreciates that.
That was a personal comment.
That was a personal comment, that's right. And I just want to say in terms of upcoming, there's a few things upcoming for you to look for. Safe Streets for All action plan and the bicycle and pedestrian master plan, transportation plan. There's a special events workshop to increase events and community connections. Housing element programs to advance housing productions, and the Enjoy catalog is out, which has, I don't even know how many summer activities for kids and others, which is just massively attended. And if you haven't signed up by now for those, you probably can't, because they get signed up so fast. Next, also in 2 weeks, we're going to go to the objective level of our overall city council priorities, which we didn't get to because we ran over last Monday. But that's where staff puts together the specific things we're going to tackle to accomplish the 4 major objectives that we have in the year. And we arm wrestle about doing more, and Ed arm wrestles to do less. I mean, the reason that we have priorities is to do the ones that are important. And I personally feel the same way about these objectives. We can't be doing hundreds of objectives or they won't get done. So I think councils can be quite reasonable on focusing on the ones that are in major support of the overall objectives. So I'm going to stop there, see if there's any press questions first, and then go to the public. Yeah, Gennady?
Sure. Yeah, you mentioned in the beginning of your
Sorry,
presentation.
one second.
Yeah, you do the mic.
Oh,
Thanks, Mayor. You mentioned earlier on in the presentation that there's some concerns about revenues, specifically because of car sales and lower revenues, which are creating some budget anxiety. You didn't mention in that context the Trump administration and the possible revenue impact you may have from grants that may not come in because of that. I'm curious, what are your thoughts about how the federal administration may impact the city budget, and what that could mean for future cuts and things like the fire station you just approved? And basically, is the city going to be like revising the long-term forecast to account for the changes at the national level?
yeah, we referenced that problem of the new administration at the priority setting offsite that we had for that reason, that we have to be cautious about budgeting because we don't know what's going to hit us tomorrow. So that's a real factor. But it's a factor that we don't know about. We do know about sales tax being low with the cars, so that's why that's in the budget right now. But I think that even in spite of that, we all are agreed, meaning staff and council, that because of the changes in the administration, we are likely to see some problems that we have to address. We have one grant now that we already have for RailSAP, and I'm not sure they can take the check back, so that's going forward. We have a earmark that was left over from last year for it was about 1.9 million for one of our fire stations. Are we going to get that in this environment? I don't know. So I think those kinds of things we're going to start to see. You probably already read that Stanford has made some cuts and some pauses because of the NIH funding that they don't have now. So we expect that could be a factor, and so we have to react to it because we don't have unlimited funds. Any other? Yeah, Dan.
Small question, but you mentioned earlier that at council meetings, you have speakers come up, residents come up and give their 3-minute, 2-minute concerns. What do you do with them? Because, they seem to float off into air. When you hear 10 residents make changes or suggestions, what happens to them? Is it taken down and given to anybody, or any follow-through?
Well, one group of those would be impacting the specific agenda item that they're speaking to. So we would be incorporating that in our thinking and voting for that night. Others are referencing things that are not on the agenda, and we have all their emails from being written down, and if it's a specific thing that we can actually act on, the city manager and his staff picks that up and gets back to the individual. Similarly with emails that we get like that as well. There's a packet that goes out, well, we see it as a packet, but there are a number of emails that go out to residents that are asking questions. Why is this happening? Why is this not? When's this going to happen? So they get answers from the appropriate person in staff that's got the expertise in that area.
So if I went before the council and said, my neighbor's lighting fires every night in front of his front yard, can you do something about it? Ed, would you take action on something like that? You would, okay.
Yes, we'll go to public now of questions on starting with what's on the table, but then we can go beyond there as well.
It's beyond, probably.
Go ahead.
Shall I say what that?
Yeah.
Okay. Some of this may be a thought why I treated you too while you were campaigning and I voted for you. For one thing, this one was probably not on one of the fatwas, but apparently AT&T wants to eliminate landlines. Now, I got a brochure today with a gadget, and it was going to be free. And it would communicate, instead of my landline, I believe, to a cell tower. I find that unlikely. So their campaign is to get rid of landlines, and I'm the person who lives across from the Junior Museum and next to everything in the community center, including Walter Hayes School. The gadget will not guarantee that I can connect with 911. I think it's very important that in some way we have some kind of public position saying, do not eliminate landlines near, basically huge municipal areas where there may be children, number one. And I called and I told the person, wherever country they were in, what I thought. That's number one. Number two is, you probably know about this company, DeLeo, which has carved up Middlefield Road all the way, it's great, from Menlo Park, and they're going towards Mountain View. And you may know that they carved up Middlefield and put up signs that said, you may not park here for a month or two. This is right in front of the stressed area with the Junior Museum. It's highly competitive parking. So I called someone, I only remember his first name in utilities. His first name was Mohammed, and I had his phone number, and I passed it out to the neighborhood. People were up in arms for this kind of behavior. And, of course, they tagged the street with their paint, and they told me that they had to use permanent paint. Otherwise, they would have to come back every 2 weeks over about a 6-month period and replace it with temporary paint. It's this kind of behavior that I'm concerned about, because I wonder, is there nothing in the contract that the city demands of contractors? This was something full of violations.
Let's check with the city manager on both of those. I wasn't aware of any decision by AT&T on phones. Go ahead.
Right.
They're
My understanding, it's a
trying to
proposal,
divide
right?
us.
Exactly, and I believe it's in front of the State Public Utilities Commission, if I'm recalling correctly, that was required to approve their move. Last I heard, they had pulled back from that requirement. I hadn't heard about them handing out or sending out gadgets as an alternative. I think you can understand why they might do that, but I think we'll keep an eye out to see what comes of that, because at some point it will need to become a formal proceeding once again. The contractor you mentioned, I'm not familiar with them working on Middlefield. I know they're on Gwynda that has been doing natural gas or our gas utility.
It's fiber optic, and we're doing a favor to Menlo Park and also to Mountain View. And I'm wondering, where is the quid pro quo? I had to pay the city to install underground. We don't have enough underground fiber optic here. And yet, where is the benefit?
Okay, so
Thank you.
it sounds like that would be the type of project that comes in with a private developer. I'm not familiar with anything involving either Menlo Park or Mountain View. It's probably one of the telecom companies, could even be AT&T, that does that under a permit. to the city
It's
or
someone else.
issued from the city. And again, we've got requirements for street work permits like that, and you know, we will ensure that the contractor is doing their construction work consistent with those permit
It
requirements.
hasn't happened, and I would love to have it happen.
We want to capture all your contact information. Megan is going to get that from you, and we'll, particularly on the second one, we can follow up on that, you know, really promptly. And if you have a picture of that gadget, that'd be good to have too.
Oh, I forgot it.
Others here?
I just wanted to make a comment about downtown being sluggish. At night, it's just amazing, and you know, a lot is going on. It's very busy.
Yeah.
I wasn't sure if you guys are aware of that.
Yeah. No, I talked with Ger Stone, and he was downtown one night, and he said, I couldn't even find a parking spot. It's just totally slammed, which is great.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, glad to hear that. Other questions, comments? Somebody in the back? Somebody in the back. Oh, okay. Janai, you get to go first.
Thanks. You made a mention about the valley water and the flood control area. I want to ask a somewhat different but similar topic. I feel like for a lot of people in Palo Alto, a more acute flood protection project involves the San Francisco Creek. And the city has been talking about replacing the Newell Road Bridge for a while, and I know there's been some complications. I was just wondering if one of you has an update of when that construction is supposed to begin and end.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, that's Public Works, but
Yes, and so, yes, we're in fact hoping to have it under construction this summer. And in order to get that, though, we are required to get some approvals from Caltrans. And so our Public Works Department is still going back and forth with Caltrans to ensure that they give us that authorization to proceed with bidding the project so that we can get a contractor on board and have the construction start this summer.
How long would it take? Sorry.
It would be, I think, really over 2 years that the construction would need to be completed.
all the way in the back, Megan on the left.
Yes. Thank you. I attended this weekend a meeting in the auditorium about Sunset and the 3,300 Menlo Park requirement. Are any members of Palo Alto government familiar with or addressing top-down powers from UN Agenda 21, 2025, 2030 requirements that through Sacramento require Palo Alto for more housing units?
I didn't quite understand the end part of that question. What did Palo Alto government do? What?
In 1992, in Rio de Janeiro, the United Nations had a world summit. This is where George H.W. Bush said 1,000 points of light, New World Order. This is when they introduced Agenda 21 for densification, to move the humans out of Portola Valley and Woodside and into 7-story tall buildings by San Antonio and El Camino, etc. Oftentimes when I see 3 different groups in Menlo Park, Sunset, SRI, Ace Hardware, fighting their own battles as if they were NIMBYs, I often encourage them, can you look to Sacramento, look upstream, and see where these forces are coming from to dictate to you in Menlo Park 3,300 units in the new housing module. I'm curious if anybody in Palo Alto government is familiar with or is addressing how we might have some remediation against forces from Sacramento, which had been levied upon us by Scott Wiener, California Assemblyman from San Francisco, and such. This would seem to be something to address because we have so much infighting then in the cities arguing about where the development should happen, while 90% of San Francisco is vacant office buildings.
Yeah, it's front burner. I think with most elected officials up and down our peninsula that I talk with. I've had a couple conversations with a state representative, not our own, so I don't want to identify this person, but over 2 years, I've been checking in with that representative saying, what are we going to do about this RENA situation? And her answer is, it's just, we have to roll back some of the processes we used in the first round. And I said, well, how about now, not next cycle, in terms of at least the timeline for the number of homes that are being presented to us that we need to get put up. Palo Alto's all in on what we want for affordable housing. We're all in for housing, but as I said before, people are asking where's the housing because they don't see it. It takes time to get this thing done, and it took 2 years for HCD to say that our housing element was okay. Meanwhile, we couldn't really move on that, so we're kind of behind the 8 ball. So at the very least, I think we should move the timetable, which she happened to agree with. And I said, well, why don't we do it now? She's speaking for her fellow state assembly members, and she said, there's no political will, so they don't want to do it. But that's why, some of us are still pounding the table and saying it just didn't work. And I've heard other assembly members in public say, we need to get this better next time. So they even get it.
Thank you.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah, and this is about bathrooms and the Palo Alto process. Bixby Park residents have complained for years, some of them, about having a bathroom at the park. And the latest version, I think third set of complaints or something like, it's going in. And it was on the priority list, and then it got dropped, and now it's back on the priority list. But something as basic, and I guess you're going to survey the residents now to see if they want a bathroom, which to me seems so obvious. Yes, you should have a bathroom in parks, particularly when kids are at parks. And I know that first residents objected because we didn't want those people using our bathrooms, meaning people from East Palo Alto coming over and using bathrooms. But I think that attitude has disappeared. But why do you have to go through a survey? Why go through this rigmarole to put in something as simple as bathrooms? I mean, I could understand maybe something like cement all over the playground, which could affect kids, but bathrooms, I mean, can't anything like that be hurried through without going through months and months and months of trying to decide what everybody wants?
I'll let Ed answer that first on the survey part of it, but I can address the other part.
Thank you. I actually think that part of the requirement for doing the installation is need to revise the plan for the park. And so as a part of bringing that forward for the plan, for the Parks and Recreation Commission, as well as ultimately City Council approval, we do want to have a current assessment of what folks in the surrounding area feel about the topic. And we do expect, well, we know that there's not unanimity of perspectives on restroom good or bad, and so we just want to be able to quantify that as a part of what will come back to the City Council for approval. It has been and it is now a part of our capital project plan, so assuming that, again, sufficient support, that the council feels comfortable moving forward, that will be coming soon.
Just a little bit of history to illustrate that point. When I was on the Parks Commission, so that was 10 years ago or something, that bathroom came up, and there was a survey, and it was dominantly against it, of not doing it. And it was a concern about homeless folks living there, was the concern, and so they didn't want it. Even then, it wasn't one-sided, but it was dominant. Fast forward to last year on the Finance Committee, everybody that spoke was in favor of a park there. So I think there is still some weighing, but this survey is going to get input, basically an update, because we're now in 2025 going to 2026, but it's not going to be a vote. It's just going to be input, and the Finance Committee was, I think, very supportive of using the CIP, capital improvement project money for a park in the 26 budget. So that's why they're right now getting the latest in updates there, so we can make a decision by June on that budget. And I think also park trends are going more towards having bathrooms. I mean, the national standards are going more towards having bathrooms now too. So that doesn't mean we have to do what anybody else does, but
was there any data that showed that other people, homeless people, might use those bathrooms?
they were.
Or it was data to confirm that?
Well, I don't know that there was a data study, but there were, we could walk over there and see that, so it was verified. Others?
pass it to a different topic.
Wasn't there a game show once, it was called Stump the Panel or something?
That's a different word at the end.
Oh,
I have a quick question about grade separation, because I haven't heard anything about it for a while. I feel like there was a move last year to kind of veer off the Churchill Avenue grade separation, and I'm curious if there's any thought been given to officially kind of ending analysis of grade separation there and kind of going to the quiet zone, kind of less stringent models. Because I feel like it's been like a decade and many millions of dollars spent, and a lot of people still have anxieties in that area about property acquisitions and whatnot. Thanks.
yeah, I was and am on the rail committee for the last 2 years, so I've been in all those meetings and all those studies, and it's sort of like, where do you want me to jump in? But I'll jump in at the end by saying, I gave a talk to Rotary earlier this week, and one of the questions I got is, when are you going to pick grade steps? Because it's so congested now, I can't get across the railroad tracks. And I said, you're not going to be happy with my answer, because if anything, it's going to take even longer, because Caltrain has to completely, finish their decisions, which they have now on technology, and so we can address that. And they have on, with a lot of negotiations on what we're going to be able to do on our engineering, because they were coming back with things that made perfect sense to an engineer and made no sense whatsoever to someone who wanted to walk or bike in an underpass. So we had some pretty stiff public negotiations with them and made progress on that. At the same time, as you know, at least up until the electric train started, there was complete depression in use of the trains. It was about 30 to 40% since the pandemic. It had come back to only 30% of pre-pandemic ridership, which basically shot their business plan out of the water. They could just start with a new spreadsheet because they didn't have the riders, and therefore they don't need to put even more trains on there, which may be sort of an organic statement that we don't need to do that as fast. Getting to your question, in the process of particularly the last year, we worked on some additional things like for safety on the way the train gates could close and quiet zones for horns and so on. But we're committed to doing engineering right now on the Charleston and Meadow, and we are. And we did get that federal grant that I mentioned earlier, about $14 million. That's funding that. Most of it's, we got a little smaller one from somewhere else. And that's ongoing. And we're looking at both of those, and we will take action on those. So finally, the answer to your question is we are prioritizing that, but we are not saying anything about the one in the middle there at Charleston. Churchill. As the first time I've done that.
So there's no plan to officially say no Churchill grade separation at this time?
No.
It's still going to be kind of in the
but
purgatory phase?
But I think it's fair to say the shift has been, we've been looking at all three equally, and now we're looking at Churchill as third because of what we need. Okay? Any of you that want to send emails to give us an input on, is it the right format? Tell us about the frequency, anything else you want, please do. My email's on the website as is Ed's, so.
Two Ed's options.
That's right. We need to get IT to work on that, to
That's right.
send it to both of us.
And maybe you could send out an announcement again to remind us the day before the meeting, because I got the announcement.
Oh, today? Yeah,
Gotcha.
yeah. Okay,